Hello, I'm Summer, and today I'll be discussing our class politics, specifically some key points that guide our class analysis within our feminist workers' utopia. Our analysis aims to dismantle capitalism, neoliberalism, and classism, and we're informed by several key points from intersectional frameworks. We realize that the liberation of all oppressed peoples necessitates the destruction of the political economic systems of capitalism and imperialism, as well as patriarchy. The Combahee River Collective, an organization of Black lesbian feminists, declares a politic that's central to a world where oppressed people can be liberated. Capitalism is a system that is built on oppression, on anti-blackness, on colonization, on patriarchy. Our utopia sees the end of capitalism as well as the violent structures intertwined with it. Secondly, our utopia would see the end of neoliberal colonization, specifically the domination of the global south over the global north. Films like Machiavellis show the inhumane work conditions that global south workers experience in order for Western corporations to retain their wealth. Global capitalism depletes non-Western countries of their resources and inflicts environmental damage on them. This colonization views the global south as disposable countries who only serve to make the global north rich. In our utopia, non-Western countries will be free of Western economic imperialism. Finally, abolition of the prison industrial complex is key to combating racialized capitalism. Angela Davis writes about the corporate function of the prison industrial complex. The institution of the prison, which itself is an important product marketed through global capitalism, becomes the privileged site into which surplus impoverished populations are deposited. It's well known that Black men are incarcerated at intentionally high rates, and this traps Black and brown communities in a cycle of poverty. The prison industrial complex also generates profit for corporations, ultimately sustaining capitalism with Black bodies. Our utopia sees the end of the prison industrial complex to further break down the interconnected systems of anti-Blackness, poverty, and capitalism.
Welcome to our Feminist Workers Utopia. My name is Robert-Frederick, and I want to share with you, my audience, how we can make a better, more inclusive, and a more safer environment for our QT-BIPOC folks. QT-BIPOC, which stands for Queer and Trans, Black, Indigenous, and People of Color, and we believe that QT-BIPOC folks are most at risk and most marginalized. On our utopia, we prioritize QT-BIPOC folks in every aspect of our landscape, from education to healthcare and to public policy. Racism, homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, and heteropatriarchy are stemmed from a capitalistic, neoliberal landscape that has created and ingrained a really dangerous place for queer and trans, Black, Indigenous people of color. These issues that belong to homophobic and transphobic capitalistic public policy laws are rooted from heteronormativity have really harmed queer and trans bodies that really stem from the D'Amelio reading, where I believe he really does talk about how these laws and public policy have created a myth of silence, invisibility, and isolation as the essential characteristics of gay life in the past as well as the present, which is why we don't want it to happen in the future. That's what we're trying to do here on this utopia. We believe in a utopia that is free from queer and trans oppression, that has not allowed so many lives to live to the fullest, because, in addition to the D'Amelio reading, he also says that these myths have contributed to an over-reliance on a strategy of coming out. And as a result, without oppression, we are able to dismantle heteronormativity and heteropatriarchy, and we are able to allow our QT-BIPOC folks to live all of their lives to the very fullest that they can. Neoliberalism has been used to conceptually draw together several key trends shaping contemporary policies and practices that have redistributed life chances over the last 40 years. These trends include a significant shift in the relationship of workers to owners, producing a decrease in real wages, an increase in contingent labor, and the decline of labor unions, the dismantling of welfare programs, trade liberalization, which you may also know as globalization, and increasing criminalization and enforced immigration. This is also from the Spade reading on page 22. We have seen how in the old world, neoliberalism has harmed marginalized communities, criminalized marijuana, put QT-BIPOC folks in jail for marijuana use and other drug use, as well as criminalized sex workers. In our feminist utopia, we believe that labor unions, welfare programs, and a standard universal income are to be given to all QT-BIPOC folks in order to help keep them out of poverty. Ideas like communal production, gift-giving, solidarity, and mutual aid are something that Black, Indigenous, and people of color who identify as queer, trans, greatly benefit from because they are part of a marginalized system due to capitalism and the effects that capitalism weighs down on marginalized communities in order to keep them marginalized. Ultimately, our feminist utopia includes a life for queer, femme, non binary, trans identifying, black, indigenous, and people of color that are free from racism, homophobia, and transphobia. A utopia where these intersectional identities are uplifted and praised rather than oppressed and subject to hatred and violence. Thank you for coming to our utopia.
Hello everyone, this is Kiana, updating you on the education standards of our Feminist Workers Utopia. Let's get started. Let's begin with our university setting. The increase of privatized higher education and corporate sponsorship has implemented knowledge as a mode of production. Capitalist culture has redefined education as a private good and public education as a privatized commodity. In order to obtain any form of higher education, students must either have the means to fully pay to be educated or take out loans. For this reason, in our utopia, education is free for all. Public education means education should be of no cost to students in order to prevent the privatization of knowledge. Preventing anyone from receiving an education only reinforces capitalist structure, but free education allows students to pursue their own interests without being indebted to anyone. In our utopia, education and knowledge belong to the public instead of benefiting specific individuals and corporations. Any money would also only be utilized for university expenses. In order to rid of the military complex currently present in today's society, any funds would be used to aid students and faculty above all other expenses. Our education system would also reevaluate and consider student acceptance not by previous high school grades or standardized tests, but allow all students to have a place in the university setting to pursue their interests in education. We would not penalize students by their previous academic history because we would not presume to know or understand their life struggles. We would also avoid prepackaged learning programs in order to prevent the exploitation and globalization of selling education for capitalist profit. All universities would be equally beneficial to students rather than being based on rank, because educational resources would be available to everyone. Let's check out faculty. Furthermore, professors and faculty should be given more power within university decision-making. Faculty should make all academic decisions and criteria rather than those who are not physically present or participants in the university setting. Faculty would always feel secure and stable in our utopia. By providing faculty the best and complete benefits possible, they'd be able to focus on their individual happiness in addition to their teaching. Faculty would have free healthcare, unlimited maternity leave and sick leave, and months' worth of vacation time. Resentment towards female scholars would be non-existent in our utopia. We would dramatically increase the amount of female workers rather than objectify them by their racialized or gendered bodies. Lastly, faculty would be able to have full control over their labor, meaning they'd be allowed to create their own academic plans and method of compensation. In order to avoid education becoming a private good, faculty would not be compensated by labor time, but by what they deemed acceptable. So what about our students? Finally, our feminist utopia would also focus on the health and well-being of students. Covered tuition, living expenses, books, supplies, childcare, and healthcare would allow students to focus on their education rather than being distracted by external stressors. Although we would love all members of our society, whether they pursued a higher education or not, we would attempt to encourage students to attend Feminist Utopia University by providing them with all resources they need. We would also prioritize and promote student mental health. Students' health in general would be our primary concern because they should be excited to learn rather than struggle to achieve a certain grade. Most importantly, our Feminist Workers Utopia would abolish any racial or gender biases. All students would be provided the same education no matter their race, gender, or sexual identity. Our universities would provide comfortability and equity that focus on the well-being of every student rather than the economy or profit. Thank you so much for watching.
Hi everyone, I will be discussing our Workers' Utopia ideologies on race. So first off, we would completely dismantle racist and racial ideology. One of the biggest ways we would do this is through education, and currently rewrite the education system as it stands to go beyond Western ideology. And also we would do diversity within different childhood books, making sure that our libraries are full of just stories from different authors who are from different ethnicity ethnicity and ethnic groups who offer a very different perspective on their life. um, just because it's easier for kids to understand at a young age that this isn't something you should do. And so if we tell kids from a young age, hey, this is not how you should act to somebody, especially if they don't look like you, is really important in our utopia, because it'll really help um, let them get used to this non-racist ideas and ideology. And more specifically, this idea stemmed from the Combahee River Collective statement, because in their statement they said that young black women specifically are told to act a certain way around white people, and that's the ideology we want to steer from. We want to make sure that everybody has a safe space and is welcomed. Secondly, we would have the reinforcement of a safe space. And in order to do this needs to happen from the top down. So people holding higher positions of power, whether that is at school, the workplace, or home, would need to really reinforce that racist ideology does not belong. And specifically, if we look at the workplace, we would offer workshops explaining the depths of racism. More specifically, microaggressions. Microaggressions are something that happen way too often in the workplace, and so these workshops would be very basic in explaining what a microaggression is, what we could do to stop it, what to do when you see it, and all that other stuff. And again, this would help create a solidarity and unity between different ethnicities. Just like this quote from the Combahee River Collective statement says, solidarity was the bridge by which different groups of people could connect on the basis of a mutual understanding, respect, and the old socialist idea that an injury to one was an injury to all. So that's what we want to start doing in our workplaces, is create this sense of unity, create this idea that we are not all that different from each other, because we have to actively get rid of existing racist ideology. And lastly, in our utopian society, diversity is a huge must sorry, mentioned before, but on all fronts, diversity of different ethnicities/minorities is a must and will be met. In order to have the racist ideologies of a safe space and to dismantle racist ideology, we have to have women minorities hold high positions of power. Because the difference between teaching children about diversity and representation and actually holding that standard up is if you tell kids that, hey, diversity matters, but you don't include diversity in any position of power or in any aspect of their life, we're telling kids that diversity isn't that important, which it is. And so that's what we want to have in our utopian society. We want to practice what we preach. And again, this idea really stemmed from the New York Times article, until black women are free, none of us will be free, because in that article it's stated by Taylor that they far no better in organizations led by white women who for the most part cannot understand how racism compounded the experience of the black woman, creating a new dimension of oppression. So the idea that diversity is a must really stemmed from this quote, because in order to have a successful movement, in order to be successful in our utopia, we have to understand how ideas like race play a part in our society. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you.
Hello everyone, this is T. I'd like to present you the labor and production aspects of our feminist worker utopia. Capitalism is a system that bases its principle on profits. This means that any product of labor and labor itself have become commodities that can be exchanged for other commodities or money. In turn, people can sell out their ability to labor as a commodity. This leads to the exploitation of laborers as capitalists take advantage of the extra labor produced by the laborers. In the utopia that we are proposing, the profits of the capitalists would not be the focus of interest. Instead, we prioritize the benefits of the worker. Workers are able to obtain an adequate payment that has the same value as the product that they produce. There would be transparency among those who are involved in the process of production so that workers should be able to evaluate their own labor costs and the value of what they make. The wages they earn would eventually be higher than what they have in our current world, and enough for them to afford their living expenses. Workers would no longer have to work long hours and earn small wages. Moreover, workers are provided with appropriate benefits such as health care, paid time off, and paid sick leave. In addition, the needs of the workers, such as health issues, school and parental responsibilities, must be accommodated. With that in mind, there would be support groups that can assist the workers so they are able to maintain their life. Moreover, workers would be met with a safe working environment where workspace and the equipment are of adequate quality. Every worker is well trained and they are provided with reasonable work and break time. As their labor is part of a collective effort, the workplace should be a communal space where workers can interact with one another and should not be isolated from each other. The hierarchies of race, gender, and class should be abolished. Those who are marginalized because of their race, sex, and class should receive appropriate support. Talks around workplace issues and other social issues would not be banned. Instead, they should be discussed so that improvements and changes would be made. Last but not least, the material resources would be distributed among the workers and would not be privately owned. Thank you for listening.
Hello, I'm Victor, and I'll be discussing the ideologies on data privacy and online activity regulations in our feminist workers' utopia. In these modern times, access to the internet and online communication have become a vital role in our daily lives for work, school, pleasure, and especially social movement organizing. This is why we believe it is important to outline the standards for online activities. The key regulations we'd like to address are encryption of private messages and personal information, clear, transparent, and ethical agreements for data collection, decisions to remove or censor content delivered with specific evidence and clear argument, removal of hate speech across all platforms and languages, all internet communications treated equally, and distribution of resources for equal access to the internet. Let's discuss these regulations in more detail, broken up into two groups. The first group revolves around user protections and rights. The regulation of encryption of private messages and personal information is to guarantee privacy. We want to make sure everyone can trust that their personal online activities will be confidential. In order to accomplish this, we will require extensive development of cybersecurity for all internet servers containing private information. The next regulation concerning agreements for data collection is essential because we want to ensure everyone's data is being responsible and with consent. To make it fair for the people, we will be requiring all terms and agreements to be in concise and clear language so that no one is misled and everyone can easily understand what information they are agreeing to provide to a platform, as well as how they are using their information. The final regulation in this group is to deliver decisions on online infringements with clear evidence supporting the decisions. This is to guarantee that the regulation of content is fair and allow the people to have the ability to appeal and hold platforms accountable for the regulations. The next group addresses equity and integrity across the internet. One of the regulations in this group is to remove all hate speech. This is to make sure that there is no harmful radicalization and promotion of ideas and activities that could incite discrimination. To do this, we will require all public content to be regulated and to dismantle hate groups so that they do not grow. The previous regulation discussing the process of decisions on removing content makes sure that this regulation is not exploited. Another regulation is to have all internet communications treated equally. Internet service providers must not discriminate on content or application, so all online activities should be able to be accessed without making it harder to access one website over another. The final regulation is to distribute resources for access to the internet so that online engagement is accessible. We will be arranging outreach programs to allow everyone the opportunity to learn how to use the internet and have access to it through shared devices and public Wi-Fi. This will promote online engagement, which will help everyone to equitably communicate online. As we have seen in the past, many movements have been diminished by the government through their advanced technology and breach of online privacy. A prominent reminder of this is highlighted by Dean Spade, explaining that strong social justice movements' demands for redistribution and information gained visibility in the 1960s and 70s, and were then systemically attacked and dismantled by the FBI's counterintelligence program and other governmentally orchestrated operations. For reasons like these, we are emphasizing data privacy and online activity in our feminist workers' utopia. Because in order to hold others accountable, the people need to rise up and get together to make an impact. The internet is a tool that can strengthen the organizing and canvassing of social justice movements, and that is essential for preventing and dismantling